One of my earliest memories as a child in Sunday school is walking in to discover we had a new Sunday school teacher. This teacher thought that memorizing Bible verses for young children was essential. The problem was, my family wasn't consistently at Sunday school. We lived far from the church, and I had a new baby sister, which meant it was kind of hard to get there for Sunday school hour. That, coupled with my lifelong difficulty at memorizing things, I spent the majority of my time in that Sunday school class horrified that I would be the only one who left without a prize, whether because I just couldn't memorize it from the last week or that I hadn't been there to get the verse. I felt like I was always behind the eight ball when it came to memorizing scripture. That image obviously has lasted with me a long time. And for some people, memorizing scripture is incredibly important. For others, maybe like me, memorization is difficult, and so memorizing of scripture just isn't at the top of the list. Memorizing scripture is kind of like people's relationship with kale or broccoli. You have a strong opinion about how you feel. And like kale and broccoli, we know memorizing scripture is probably good for us, even if it isn't our favorite thing. And we know that if we put the effort towards swallowing the kale or enjoying the broccoli or memorizing that verse, it probably isn't going to hurt us. In fact, we'll probably be better for it. Jesus himself had scripture memorized. When Satan takes him into the desert to tempt him for the 40 days, every time Satan tempts him, Jesus responds with scripture. Jesus and the Pharisees got into conflict throughout Jesus' entire ministry because the Pharisees saw Jesus doing things and quoted scripture to him to say how he was doing it wrong. Each time Jesus responded back. He responded back, sometimes with scripture, sometimes with lessons, but always with the point that the Pharisees, despite having the message in their hearts, they didn't actually know it. See, there's where memorizing scripture gets tricky. You can know the words by heart, but has it changed your heart? Do you just know the words to know the words? Or have you memorized a verse or a passage because every time you feel a certain way, that is what draws you back into God's graces? Memorizing scripture is hard. As someone whose parents had to help her and she'd take a whole week to memorize spelling words and vocabulary words, I feel for those who are like me, where it's just a struggle to memorize anything. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't, right? There are fantastic verses in Hebrew and James that tell us that we shouldn't covet. There are other passages in the Psalms that tell us how to find comfort when doubt creeps in. There's a verse in Exodus 14 that I've been trying to learn for months about how the Lord will fight for us, and all we have to do, is keep still. Do I know that passage word for word? No, and I probably won't ever. But I know the theme. I know the idea. I know that sometimes I conjure up imaginary battles in my head or in my heart that really isn't of God. And if I release it and just hold still and hold fast in God's promises, God will take care of it. So, if you're fantastic at memorizing scripture, awesome. Dive into it. Find a verse or a passage that speaks to you and fills your soul and is a means of changing your heart. If you're not and you want to be better at it, try picking a song to put the verse to. You'd be amazed how music can embed itself in your brain better than just words on a page. And if that doesn't work, I hope you'll join me. Memorize the concepts, the ideas, the messages God is trying to give us. Because ultimately, memorizing scripture or not being able to, or being somewhere in the middle, it's really about a change of heart. Letting our hearts be changed by God's words and God's presence. That is what we should do. Don't necessarily know it by heart, but know it in your heart.